Hi everybody, welcome back to Project Happy Home. For those of you who are new here, I'm Tanya, a doctor, lawyer turned homeschool mom of 3 kids ages 9, 6, and 4. If you're interested in videos about secular homeschooling, raising a child with ADHD, and living a more essentialist lifestyle in general, you've come to the right place because that's what I talk about here. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button down below so that you don't miss any of my videos. In today's video, I'm participating in a collab hosted by my friend Shalise over at Sodbuster Living. Shalise is an awesome homeschool mom who focuses mainly on Charlotte Mason in the real world. So if you are interested in Charlotte Mason at all, she is a great channel to follow. I will link it below in the description box, so be sure to check her out. And I will also link the playlist, which will have other moms that are participating in this collab as well. Today we are talking about our summer reading recommendations. Now, Shalise set a limit at 5 books, and you guys know me, that is like really hard to do, but I managed to just peruse my shelves really quickly to tell you 5 books that I think are really excellent and will be great additions to your summer reading list. So, the first one I'm going to talk about is just a book of short stories, and this is Arranged Marriage by Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni, and I might be pronouncing that wrong, but she is a literature professor as far as I can remember. And I loved this book. This is a book of short stories. Short stories are great, I find, particularly if you have fallen off the reading bandwagon. I know that as moms, a lot of us sometimes, we're reading aloud so much to our kids, particularly as homeschool moms, that our reading life, our personal reading life falls off a little bit. That sustained attention and sustained time available for reading an entire novel becomes less. So short stories are a good way to break back into that reading life of your own. So this book, Arranged Marriage, is a collection of 11 short stories, mainly about Indian women. The stories take place both in the past and the present. They take place in India, as well as I think abroad in Europe and America. They range in topic from, arranged marriage, what we're talking about in the past, the way it worked, from a wife's perspective, from a maid's perspective, from a daughter's perspective, all the way to arranged marriage and how it kind of occurs nowadays and how it can both be life-giving as well as very soul-crushing. And the different stories are beautifully wrought. This is not typical for what you would expect. It's not where all the women are blameless and all the men are horrible. Some of the stories, the women are the selfish characters and the men are the ones who are giving their best effort. So it's a really interesting, complex examination of relationship when it is thrust upon you in a way. When your most intimate relationship is thrust upon you and you did not choose necessarily the person who would be your spouse. So if you're curious at all about, that concept of arranged marriage, if you're curious about Indian culture, if you are Indian yourself, this is a really good read. It is really wonderfully written, and the stories themselves are strong throughout. I would say that out of the 11 stories in this book, I liked several of them. Often when I read a short story compilation, I only like one, and I find that the others are markedly less good, but this one was really strong throughout, and I can't recommend it highly enough. The next book I have is another good book if you want to just dip your toe back into reading, because it is a short read. I think it's about, 117 pages. It is The Lover by Marguerite Duras, and it is one of my favorite books ever. It is a romance in one sense, but it is much more an exploration of coming of age. It's a very introspective book about a young woman in Indochina falling in love for the first time, perhaps inappropriately, with someone much older than her, and that exquisite, heightened level of sensuality and emotion and just life that you feel in your teenage years. You are so excruciatingly aware of yourself in the world. You are excruciatingly aware of all the changes that are happening in your body, your reactions to people. There is this odd awareness that maybe what you're feeling isn't totally legitimate, but you're feeling it so honestly that you feel like everyone else is living a lie and you're the only one experiencing a true existence. I think The Lover as a book captures that heightened sense of life that you have as a teenager so incredibly well. And of course, her life as a teenager is much more dramatic than many of ours was, but nonetheless, it is a beautiful, evocative tale of both a time and a place and an age or stage of growing up. So as a woman, I think you would love this book. And it's a really interesting book for a man as well, I think, because it offers so much insight into the mind of a young woman and how we perceive ourselves through the reactions of others, through the actions of others. Yeah, a gorgeous, gorgeous film. I've actually seen the movie as well. I prefer the book. I think the book is exquisite from beginning to end. Every line is beautifully rendered, and it's just a lovely, lovely book. So The Lover. This is one of my favorite books from teenagehood, and it remains one of my favorite books. I recently reread it last year. This is by Michelle Magorian, and it is not a Swan. It was the first Michelle Magorian book I ever read, and after rereading it as an adult again, I ordered a couple more Michelle Magorian books just because I was struck by how much I enjoyed her writing. This is about a 17-year-old girl in England during World War II, and she has to evacuate London because of the bombings, etc. And she's the ugly duckling. She's the plain Jane among her family of sisters. Her two older sisters are much more beautiful than her. They receive all that attention in this village that they go to, etc. But she has to sort of find her own way at this point, you know? It's a time without parental guidance, but at the same time, they have someone looking after them. There is a lot of freedom. The book does a really good job of talking about that time period in a coastal seaside English town during the war, the things that they worried about, the way they reacted to soldiers coming home, the wartime parties, the levity mixed with that underlying dread. I think the book does a really good job of, again, tracking a young girl's development and the way your life still revolves around you, even in a time of war, even in a time when such serious things are happening around you. Your own growth, the individual people you meet in your life, you know, the scenery, the way the air feels, the clothes you wear, all of those things matter so much. And Michelle Magorian does a great job, again, of weaving a tale that keeps you engaged and also transports you entirely to that time. So not a Swan. And this one's a little bit longer, you guys. This one's about 400 pages. My next summer reading recommendation is A Literary Education by Emily Cook. The subtitle of this book is Adapting Charlotte Mason for Modern Secular Homeschooling. Now, as you guys know if you watch my channel, I am very eclectic. We do everything from traditional schooling to classical schooling with memory work. We do Charlotte Mason with a lot of read alouds and nature study. We also do a little bit of Waldorf when it comes to how we structure our day and rhythm. So we're all over the place. We are truly eclectic. However, I do appreciate so many principles that Charlotte Mason put out there for how we interact with our children, how we value living books for their education, and handicrafts and nature study. So I was really thrilled when Emily wrote this. Emily Cook is the author of the Build Your Library curriculum, which I love and fully intend on using for several years. It is a literature-based curriculum. You can look it up. I'll link it down below as well. But she wrote A Literary Education, and it does a great job of moving Charlotte Mason into our present time. So a lot of Charlotte Mason online that you will see, a lot of the advice can sometimes be really old-fashioned. There is this idea that in Charlotte Mason that only the books that were written over 100 years ago are worthwhile because they're on Charlotte Mason's reading list. I personally think Charlotte Mason would disagree with that approach. I think great literature has been written in the last 100 years, in the last 5 years, and I think a lot of the books that are coming out now and came out when we were children will be regarded as classics in the next 50 years. Something isn't a classic by virtue of being old. Literature becomes classic literature by virtue of really tapping into the human experience and being able to convey that to many different people of different backgrounds, etc. So, like, for example, Not a Swan obviously is not a classic because it isn't known by many people, I don't think. But to me, it's a classic because it so clearly captures both a time in history and a time in a young girl's life. The writing is beautiful and strong, and so is the story. So all of those elements combined like sweep you away. To me, a classic is a book that sweeps a lot of us away, even though we are from such different backgrounds, into one character's experience where we feel transported and connected to this character on the page, to the story, and it lingers with us both by virtue of the writing and the story and the powerful characters in the story. She does a great job of talking about that and about talking about how you can practically incorporate Charlotte Mason tenets into today's modern world with cars and TVs and computers and all the things that we have now, the time constraints we have now. I mean, our kids, have a different timetable and different rhythms, and Emily's book does a great job of talking realistically about how we can bring the principles of Charlotte Mason education into the modern world. So I really recommend it. The last book, the fifth book that I will recommend is The Whole Brain Child by Daniel Siegel and Tina Payne Bryson. The Whole Brain Child, to me, is the best parenting book that exists, period. And it's not really a parenting book. It is much more about understanding how children's brains work and about nurturing your relationship with your child based on brain physiology. When we think about stress response, when we think about how we analyze communication, how children view language and physical actions and just response, how can we best convey love and support and guidance to our children without scarring them, without unnecessarily scaring them, without speaking over their heads, without working against our ultimate purpose, which is to develop strong, competent, secure adults, right? So I love this book. It's not an easy read. This is definitely like professional development for parents. This is not an easy read. It is definitely written in a much more scientific way than a lot of parenting books are. However, I think it is worth the effort. And you can read it little bits at a time. It's 12 revolutionary strategies. The entire book is mostly textual, but it also has scattered throughout it these cartoons. And the cartoons are really helpful because some of them will just talk about things like left brain, right brain. You can share the cartoons with your kids when you talk about it. But they also talk about the strategies in terms of presenting one cartoon where it's what you shouldn't do and one cartoon of what it is that you should do. And let me just tell you, when I first read this book, so many of the things of what you shouldn't do is exactly how I was doing it, because they don't pick like extreme responses. Like, it's not like, don't hit your kid, do this instead. It'll have minute differences between what we typically do, how we typically respond to situations, and how we can phrase things better, how we can approach relationships with our kids and interactions with our kids in a more collaborative way rather than an authoritative way. And I really learned a lot from this book. I have reread this book several times, mainly because it's really hard. It's really hard to be even-keeled and to be compassionate and kind and adjust your tone of voice and to stay on, your child's level most of the time. It is hard. When one kid is, hitting another kid, it's hard to remember what Dan Siegel teaches and to speak calmly and to speak in a way that, actually is with an aim for that kid to understand why hitting is probably not the best way to go. Instead of just saying, well, you must have done something or whatever, I really like it. I think there's a lot to learn from it. I think it's a book worth purchasing so that you can sit with it and reread it frequently as we go throughout this parenting journey. Last but not least, because of course I can't restrict myself to any kind of number when it comes to book recommendations, this book by Nora Ephron, it's called I Feel Bad About My Neck and Other Thoughts on Being a Woman, which is hilarious. If you don't know Nora Ephron, she's the woman behind When Harry Met Sally. The movie Heartburn was based kind of on her life and her adulterous husband, etc. She is hilarious. She was hilarious. And it's amazing to read her works because I had never read her books until this one. And since then I've read a few more. But the way she writes is so much the way women think and the way we laugh at ourselves and the way we are wry and self-deprecating, but also really proud of our weirdness. So I think you would really appreciate this book. The age group that this book is directed to, I think, is a little bit older than most of us. But as someone who will turn 40 this year, I thought this was appropriate, and I really have enjoyed it. I think it's funny. Every chapter in this book is separated out into different topics. So some of them are about like how she hates her purse and the fact that she has to carry a purse and stuff like that, and that she's never been good at finding like the right purse, like some women who like can do that so well. She does a great job of making us all feel in it together, while also very clearly pointing out that women are not the same, and that we're all really different, and that is a good thing, and that sometimes we need friends who are really different than us to kind of keep us in line and also bring us out of our shell, etc. So really fun poolside read if you guys just want like a low-key book that you can just pick up and put down or leave in your pool bag or the bag you carry with you as you take your kids around to summer camps and things like that. This is a good choice for that. So there you have it. Those were my recommendations. As I mentioned before, this is part of a collab hosted by my friend Shalise over at Sodbuster Living. So be sure to check the description box below and check the playlist to see who else is participating. And definitely check out Shalise's video because she reads more than most people I know, and I'm sure she'll have some great recommendations for us. As always, you guys, I appreciate your time. Thank you for spending some of it with me, and I wish you the very best day.